The air inside the factory always hummed with a deep, rumbling song. It was a tune Mike knew well, a constant companion to his days. Giant metal arms swung back and forth, pressing shapes into sheets of steel. Sparks flew like tiny, bright stars, briefly lighting up the dusty corners. Mike, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and a thoughtful gaze, stood by one of the machines. His job was to load new metal and check the finished pieces. It wasn't a flashy role, and it certainly wasn't loud like some of the other jobs, but Mike did it with a quiet focus. He watched the gears turn, the belts spin, and the parts click into place. Each movement was precise, a dance of steel and power. Mike often found himself observing the tiny details, the subtle shudders, or the faint squeaks that others might miss. He wasn't one for big jokes or loud chatter. He just worked, his hands moving with a practiced rhythm. The repetitive nature of the task didn't bother him. In fact, there was a comfort in its predictability. He was a small part of a big, busy machine, a quiet presence in a world of clanging metal and whirring motors. Even though Mike was good at his quiet job, not everyone saw it that way. His coworkers, like Loud Bob with his greasy hands, often made fun of him. "Careful there, Mike," Bob would bellow, seeing Mike adjust a metal sheet. "Don't trip over your own feet again." Others would snicker, remembering the time Mike accidentally bumped a stack of boxes, sending them clattering. He tried to laugh it off, but the heat in his cheeks told a different story. Then there was Sarah. She was the supervisor, about Mike's age, with bright, intelligent eyes and a confident way of walking. She was very pretty, and everyone looked up to her. But Sarah often looked right through Mike. When she did speak to him, it was usually to give a quick, sharp order or to point out a mistake. "Mike, that piece isn't aligned properly," she'd say, her voice cool and a little impatient. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you're even paying attention." Her words stung more than Bob's teasing. They made Mike feel truly invisible, like a small cog in a giant machine that no one really cared about. He would just nod, a little blush creeping up his neck, and quickly fix whatever she pointed out, wishing he could just disappear. He knew he wasn't clumsy, not really, but their words made him doubt himself. As the factory whistle shrieked, signaling the end of the day, Mike felt a familiar lift in his spirits. The teasing and Sarah's cool glances faded as he walked out, leaving the noise and the judgment behind. His old pickup truck rattled down the road, taking him away from the steel and the snickers towards the place where he truly belonged. When he opened the door to his small house, a different kind of warmth wrapped around him. "Daddy!" His daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed 6-year-old, shouted, running to hug his legs. His son, Tom, a sturdy 8-year-old, grinned from the kitchen table where he was drawing. Mike's wife, Emily, met him with a gentle smile and a quick kiss. "Rough day, honey?" she'd ask, already knowing the answer from the slight slump in his shoulders. Here, he wasn't clumsy Mike or invisible Mike. He was Dad, the strongest man in the world to Lily, the best storyteller to Tom, and a loving husband to Emily. They didn't care if he sometimes bumped things or if his job wasn't fancy. They saw him for who he really was, kind, hard-working, and important. Dinner was always a lively affair, filled with chatter about school and silly jokes. In their eyes, he was a hero, and their love was a comforting blanket that made the factory's harsh words disappear. The next morning, the factory's usual hum felt different. Mike had arrived early, his mind still warm with memories of Lily's bedtime story and Tom's drawings. He was busy loading sheets into his machine when a new, unsettling sound cut through the air. It wasn't the steady clang or the rhythmic where he was used to. This was a harsh, grinding screech like metal tearing apart. Everyone paused, heads turning towards the biggest press, a towering beast of steel that usually operated with a powerful, deep thud. Now it was roaring. The massive arm, which normally descended with slow, crushing force, began to jerk erratically, slamming down with terrifying speed, then shooting back up too fast. The entire machine started to shake, a violent tremor that spread through the concrete floor. Bolts groaned, steam hissed from unexpected places, and the giant gears spun wildly, faster than they ever should. A panel on its side flew open with a loud bang, revealing a tangle of sparking wires. A few workers near it jumped back, their faces pale with alarm. This wasn't just a breakdown. Something was terribly wrong. The whole building seemed to shiver with the machine's uncontrolled fury. Panic began to ripple through the factory floor. The screeching and violent shaking of the giant press grew louder, more frantic. Workers who moments before had been busy with their tasks now stood frozen, their eyes wide with fear. Bob, usually so loud and full of jokes, looked pale and unsure, his mouth slightly open. Sarah, the supervisor, rushed forward, her confident stride now a hurried dash, her face etched with worry. "What's happening?" she yelled over the din, but no one had an answer. The machine's powerful arm slammed down, missing its target, and crushed a heavy workbench instead, sending splinters and tools flying. A shower of sparks rained down from the exposed wires, smelling of burning plastic and ozone. The entire factory vibrated so much that small items started falling from shelves. This wasn't just a broken machine. It was a monster unleashed. If it kept going, it could tear itself apart, sending huge pieces of metal flying, or worse, cause a fire or explosion that would bring down the whole building. Everyone knew it. The air was thick with fear, and a silent question hung over them all. What could they do? Who could stop this out-of-control beast? Amidst the chaos, while others froze or screamed, Mike felt a cold dread, but something else stirred too. He watched the massive machine's violent dance, not just with fear, but with a keen, observing eye. All those times he'd been called unimportant, all those quiet hours he spent watching the factory's heartbeat, suddenly made sense. He remembered the old blueprints he'd seen once, the hidden safety features, the backup shut-off switches. He knew this machine, not just how to feed it metal, but how its guts worked. He'd noticed the small, often ignored emergency lever, tucked away behind a maintenance panel, designed for exactly this kind of wild malfunction. No one else seemed to know about it, not even the mechanics who usually handle repairs. It was an older model, and that specific shutoff was rarely used. Mike's heart pounded, a frantic drum against his ribs. He was scared, very scared. He thought of Lily's bright eyes, Tom's eager questions, and Emily's gentle smile. But he also knew, deep down, that he was the only one who could stop this. His quiet observations, once dismissed as pointless, were now the key. With a surge of purpose, Mike pushed past his fear. His eyes, usually downcast, now held a fierce determination. He didn't shout or call for attention. He just moved. While Bob and other workers were scrambling away, pushing past each other to get to safety, Mike started running towards the monstrous machine. The ground shook violently with each of its uncontrolled slams, making his footing unsure. Sarah, who had been trying to yell instructions and keep people calm, saw him. Her eyes widened in disbelief and then horror as Mike sprinted into the danger zone. "Mike, no! Get back!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the machine's deafening roar. Sparks rained down like fiery needles, and a piece of twisted metal shot past his head with a terrifying whistle. Mike ignored it all. His focus was solely on the machine, on the hidden panel he knew held the key. He dodged a swinging arm, his heart hammering, every step a gamble against the destructive power of the runaway press. He wasn't the clumsy Mike anymore. He was a man on a mission, fueled by the memory of his family and the desperate need to save everyone. Getting to the machine was one thing. Getting to the shutoff was another. The press was a swirling, smashing monster. Its main arm swung down with bone-shaking force, then lunged back up, missing Mike by inches. He had to duck under a shower of falling debris, then quickly sidestep a whipping cable that snapped dangerously close to his face. The roar was deafening, making it hard to think, let alone hear his own ragged breaths. He scrambled over a pile of scattered metal parts, his boots slipping on the oily floor. The emergency panel he sought was on the far side, meaning he had to get even closer to the machine's most violent parts. Each step was a battle against the shaking ground and the machine's unpredictable attacks. Sparks flew, some landing on his clothes, burning tiny holes. He could feel the heat radiating from the overworked metal. He reached for a handhold, a sturdy pipe, but it vibrated so fiercely his fingers nearly lost their grip. Just as he thought he was close, a sudden jolt from the machine sent a wave of force through the air, knocking him off balance. He fell, scraping his knee, but quickly pushed himself back up, his eyes fixed on the small, red lever. He was so close. Mike lunged forward, his injured knee screaming in protest. The red lever was just within reach, but a massive gear spun dangerously close. He had to time it perfectly. Waiting for a split second, he saw a tiny gap, a moment of less violent movement. With a grunt, he stretched his arm as far as it could go, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of the lever. Another lurch of the machine tried to rip him away, but he held on tight, pushing with all his might. His hand closed around the lever, and he pulled it down with a desperate final yank. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. The machine roared on, the vibrations still shaking the factory. Then, a shudder ran through the giant press, different from its wild shaking. The deafening screech began to lessen, becoming a strained groan. The massive arm slowed, its wild swings becoming smaller, weaker. The gears turned more slowly, grinding as if tired. The sparks dwindled, then stopped. Slowly, painfully slowly, the entire machine began to wind down, its monstrous sounds fading into a series of clicks and hisses. Finally, with a soft sigh of escaping steam, it fell silent. The silence that followed was even more powerful than the noise, a heavy blanket of relief. Mike stood there, trembling, his chest heaving, the air thick with the smell of hot metal and his own raw courage. The sudden quiet was startling, almost painful after the ear-splitting roar. Everyone slowly emerged from their hiding spots, their faces still pale, but now etched with a dawning understanding. They looked at the silent, still machine, then at Mike, who stood leaning against it, catching his breath, his clothes smudged with grease and dust. Bob, who had been hiding behind a stack of crates, peered out, his jaw hanging open. He stopped it. He whispered, his usual bravado gone. Other workers nodded slowly, their eyes fixed on Mike with a mixture of shock and profound relief. It wasn't the mechanics or the safety team, or even Sarah, who had bravely tried to take charge. It was Mike, the quiet, supposedly clumsy worker, who had faced down the danger. They saw the tiny burn marks on his shirt, the scrape on his knee, and the sheer exhaustion on his face. They realized the immense risk he had taken, the bravery it had required. A wave of awe rippled through the group. No one spoke, but their eyes, wide and unblinking, said it all. Mike had saved them. He had saved the factory, and he had done it all by himself. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, watching Mike. Her heart was still hammering, but not just from fear anymore. It was from a mix of shock, admiration, and a deep, unsettling feeling in her stomach. She had seen him run towards the danger, while her own instincts had screamed at her to run away. She had screamed at him to stop, to come back, thinking he was being foolish, clumsy even. But he hadn't. Now, seeing him standing there, bruised and breathless, but completely triumphant, she felt a profound shift. The quiet man she had barely noticed, the one she had dismissed with sharp words, was the one who had saved them all. The image of him dodging flying metal, his face set with fierce purpose, was burned into her mind. She thought of all the times she'd called him unimportant, all the times she'd overlooked him. A blush of shame crept up her neck, mixing with a fading fear. Mike wasn't just a worker, he was a hero, and she, the confident supervisor, had been completely wrong about him. The realization left her deeply shaken, her previous view of him completely shattered and replaced with a sudden, overwhelming sense of awe. As the initial shock gave way to quiet murmurs of admiration, Sarah finally moved. She walked slowly towards Mike, her confident steps now tentative. Her usual sharp gaze was softened by a mix of concern and something akin to humility. Mike looked up, surprised to see her so close. He expected a quick, professional thank you, maybe a reminder to fill out an incident report. Instead, Sarah stopped in front of him, her hands clasped together. "Mike," she began, her voice a little shaky, I don't know what to say." She paused, taking a deep breath. "You were incredibly brave. You risked your life, and you saved everyone. You saved the factory." Her eyes met his, and this time they truly saw him. I've been wrong about you, Mike. Terribly wrong. I called you unimportant, clumsy. I dismissed you." A genuine sadness filled her eyes. "I am so sorry for how I treated you." She looked down for a moment, then back up. "You're not unimportant, Mike. You're a hero. Thank you." Her voice was soft, sincere, and filled with a regret that made Mike feel a pang in his chest. He just nodded, a small, tired smile on his face, surprised by her heartfelt apology. News of Mike's incredible bravery spread like wildfire through the factory. Soon, the factory boss, a stern man named Mr. Henderson, arrived, his face usually serious, now showing clear relief. He listened to Sarah's report, his eyes widening as she explained how Mike had acted. He then walked directly to Mike, extending a hand. "Mike," he said, his voice firm but respectful, "that was an act of extraordinary courage. You saved lives, and you saved this plant. We are all deeply indebted to you." Even Bob, the loudest of Mike's teasers, came forward, looking uncomfortable but sincere. "Mike," he mumbled, I guess I owe you more than just an apology. You know, clumsy fool, you're a hero. Thanks, man." Other workers clapped him on the shoulder, their faces showing genuine admiration. No more snickers, no more dismissive glances. They saw the true Mike now, not just the quiet worker, but the sharp-eyed observer, the brave man who didn't hesitate when everyone else ran. For the first time, Mike felt the warmth of true respect from his co-workers, a feeling that settled deep in his chest, making him stand a little taller. The drive home felt different that evening. Mike was exhausted, his body aching from the close call, but his heart felt light. The factory's praises, Sarah's sincere apology, and the newfound respect from his co-workers wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He wasn't just Mike from the factory anymore. He was the man who had stopped the monster. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw the lights on in his house, a beacon of love and comfort. When he stepped inside, the familiar shouts of "Daddy" greeted him, but tonight, they felt even more special. Lily pointed to his scraped knee with a worried frown, and Emily rushed over, her eyes full of concern. He downplayed the danger, but he couldn't hide the quiet pride in his eyes. Later, as he tucked Lily and Tom into bed, they listened, wide-eyed, as he told a simpler version of the day's events, making him the hero of his own story. Their hugs were tighter, their "I love you, Daddy" whispers filled with extra awe. He smiled, knowing he didn't need a medal or a fancy title. Their love, combined with the knowledge that he had truly made a difference and saved lives, was the greatest reward. He was a hero, not just to them, but to himself. The next week, Mike was back at his usual post, feeding metal sheets into his machine. The familiar hum of the factory filled the air, but everything felt different. His coworkers no longer made jokes at his expense. Bob would now offer a friendly nod, sometimes even a genuine smile. Mike still wasn't one for loud chatter, but a quiet confidence now settled around him. He moved with the same steady rhythm, but his posture was a little straighter, his eyes holding a knowing glint. Sarah, his supervisor, was perhaps the most changed. She would often walk past his station, not to give a sharp order, but to offer a small, respectful smile. Sometimes she would even stop, asking his opinion on a tricky machine setting, truly listening to his thoughtful responses. She saw the detailed observations he made, the quiet knowledge he possessed, and the deep strength hidden beneath his calm nature. Mike continued to be the quiet observer, but now, everyone, especially Sarah, saw him for the hero he truly was. The factory still roared and clanged, but for Mike, it was a place where he was finally seen, respected, and appreciated. He was still a factory dad, but now he carried the quiet pride of a man who had faced a monster and won.